What's up, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's happening with NIO, Tesla, SPY, and the overall markets. Just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 30 in total. And the offer ends at the end of March, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's talk about what's happening with the markets. Looking at NIO, we're attempting to form a cup and handle like structure, but we need NIO to hold above 4.27 at the very least to try to continue to push higher. If we lose support at 4.22, we are going to continue to dip back down to the lower $4 area. So whether or not we get a big bounce is going to depend on some factors. Let's talk about some news first, and I'll break down the charts. So as far as NIO is going, NIO is continuing to give its ET9 a lot of credit as it's going to be very competitive. And besides that, I haven't seen anything else that's new on their Twitter page. There were some headlines coming out, though, asking the question if NIO is worth a buy, at least for 2025. I've seen a lot of headlines about this. When it comes to its valuation, one thing that's worth mentioning is the fact that when you look at their overall price to sales ratio, it's very, very low for NIO. Very, very low for NIO compared to its competitors. And it's very important to note that because NIO is at a very, very low price right now. And if anything, you could argue that it's undervalued because of that. And then on top of this, we've been looking for very consistent growth for it on a monthly basis. That's very awesome news for NIO. That's a good piece of news because revenue is going to continue to increase, but the more it increases, the better their margins will improve. So that's a very, very good sign as well. So is NIO going to be very strong for 2025? One thing worth mentioning is the fact that they're not profitable yet, and many investors may be waiting for that. But as time progresses, there's going to be a lot of potential for that. So although I can't give financial advice, I would say that the price that NIO is at is very, very good for the long term. Could there be a lot of dips coming? We're already at a big dip. We're barely in the low fours. And if we do see lower levels, like I said before, it's a very good buying opportunity. But as time progresses, don't forget that NIO is going to be a marathon and not a sprint. So just keep that in mind. I'm still seeing headlines about that. For the shorter term, NIO has a sell rating from Goldman Sachs. Nothing has improved from there. The price-price ratio has been dipping, once again showing some weakness compared to the markets. And then Mondays tend to be green only about 49% of the time, so not the best, at least for NIO. Volume is also kind of lacking a bit, so we'll see how things end up developing. That's going to be very important for us as well. Now, for the broader markets, it looks very, very mixed. We saw some big tech stocks in the red, like Tesla, Microsoft, and the others, whereas other big tech stocks like Google and Meta were in the green. And the market was very mixed, very flat on Friday. So this is how we ended up closing off. Just know that for the week, going into tomorrow, it's going to be Monday, January 27th. There's just minor data involving housing, nothing else that's way too significant. But besides that, on Tuesday, we just have the Richmond Fed announcing some data. And then for going all the way back down to Wednesday, that's when we have the FOMC meeting with Jerome Powell giving a speech. That's going to be huge for the market. So when Wednesday comes, expect some high volatility. The market thinks there's a 99% chance we get basically the Fed keeping everything the same. What matters is going to be what Jerome Powell says about the future. For earnings, we have a lot of communications and bank earnings coming out on Monday. On Tuesday, we have Boeing and GM, and then starting Wednesdays when we have big tech earnings from Tesla to Meta, Microsoft, and Apple. Lots of big tech earnings this week, so get ready, guys. We're going to be expecting some high volatility. Besides that, the fear and greed index is currently at neutral, so it's in the middle. Neutral is making up the majority of momentum, and we'll have to see what else ends up happening. The put to call option ratio is also at extreme greed right now. Typically, when it hits these extremes, that's when the market forms a top or a bottom. And then volatility is also at neutral. We're going to be watching to see if the VIX gets a bounce. For now, guys, the market's very neutral. So what do I see from this point on? It depends on if NIO could try to get a push from here. If we could hold 4.27, we're looking for a push back up to about 4.5. If we end up losing 4.22, I'm looking for a dip back down to about 4.1, eventually the low fours. As of right now, there's a possible cup and handle like structure that's beginning to develop right over here. So this could be like our double bottom cup, and this could be like a handle. So typically this setup does lead to more upside and then a continuation higher if we do get that break. So this does look a little bit more bullish, as we have a higher low being made right here. So technically speaking, it does favor upside a little bit more, but that depends on if it could hold support or not. To really start pushing, you want to see it break past 4.5. If we break that, we have the potential to go back into the fives because we have to break our 200 EMA. We haven't been able to do that for a very, very long time. If you look at the last few months, we just continue to reject near the 200 EMA. So it's going to take some time to break through that. I would like to see us try to test it, and we'll see about that. So although technicals look a bit more bullish, I would still warn to be careful with this because there's still a lot of tensions politically and other things affecting this. As far as SPY goes, we have a big bearish divergence developing on the 4-hour and also on the daily chart. And we pumped very nicely only to get a rejection here. So we're going to be watching to see if we get a continuation lower. On the daily charts, don't forget SPY has a gap to fill, and this is happening right before FOMC. So going into tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised if we shuffle a bit and eventually come down to fill this gap. I think we're going to be coming down to fill this gap soon within the next couple of days, so just keep that in mind. Same thing with Nvda. Sorry, not Nvidia. Same thing with the QQQ and Nvidia, which I will talk about later. But the QQQ may shuffle like this, and before it starts to dip, if we do come down to fill this gap, if we break 535, we turn bullish. Otherwise, we favor downsides. Just keep that in mind. On the IWM Russell 2000, same thing. We have some gaps to fill. There's one at 420, at 224. There's a gap to fill. There's another one down here. I wouldn't be surprised if we just continue to consolidate like this, and we eventually make our way down to fill that first gap all the way back down like this as the most likely possibilities. ES is also shuffling. If we break the all-time high at 61.68, we tend to push higher, but we're in the chop zone, and there's a gap to fill down here. So there's going to be a risk of us coming down to fill that gap. Same thing with NQ. There's a gap to fill down here at 21,700. Could be coming back down to fill that gap, so watch and see if that ends up being the case. Nvidia got a big bearish engulfing candle. Might rebound tomorrow morning before it continues to dip. But we're going to be looking for an attempt to retest 145 plus, and then if we get a rejection, if we can't hold above 145, we're looking for a dip all the way down to 140 to 138. So be careful with that. Tesla's looking weaker approaching its earnings. There's going to be a risk of Tesla dipping a little bit more to the lower 400, so we'll see if it could hold 400 or not. So look for a bit more downside, and we'll see if buyers come in. I do want to note that Tesla has earnings this week, so there could be buyers that come in later. But for now, we do look bearish. Technically speaking, we still favor downside a bit more before we see some kind of bounce possibly later on. Apple's on a bit of a downtrend. We're trying to hold 220 to 221. And if we end up holding that, we could just continue to shuffle between 226 and 220 going back and forth. We'll see if we get some kind of break or not, so give this the time that it needs. For a few more factors out there, we have Coinbase. Coinbase got a rejection, at least on the daily chart. We have a gap to fill down here around 295. Might come down to fill that gap before it starts to dip lower. And we'll have to see if we get a bounce or not, but I do anticipate some downside. For Amazon, it's still bullish. We're nearing these highs, and we're doing a good job at holding up. But we have to try to hold above 235. If we could close above that, we remain bullish, going for 238. If we don't hold above 235, we're going to be dipping back down to 233, then eventually the gap fill for 230. So I'll be watching that very, very closely. For Meta, we look bullish. We're at all-time highs. There's no sign of rejection yet, so it looks like it may try to continue because of earnings. So it's on a very strong uptrend. We need to see this thing essentially lose 636 for us to turn back down to like the 620s. Otherwise, we favor upside for 650, then eventually 655 plus. Microsoft, it's in the middle here. We need to try to break past 448. If we can't, we could be dipping back down towards 440 or below. So watch that very closely, especially as we have a gap to fill. We'll be watching these levels at least just as time goes on. For Google, Google's on a very, very nice uptrend just like this. If we end up losing support right here at 198, we could be dipping to 195. If we break past 204, we're going to be looking for an attempt to push for 208. So we're on a nice uptrend on the daily chart. We're favoring upside. We'll have to see if we break past 204 or not. Otherwise, we could be dipping back down to fill our gap over here around the 192s. I think Google looks bullish, and we could be favoring upside looking at this setup, but we need to try to break 202 to remain bullish. So far, it's looking quite good. So with that being said, there are some big tech stocks that are trying to hold up. We'll see how well SPY and the others try to hold up. We do have some gaps to fill below, so I'm going to be very careful with these. Make sure you watch your levels just to be safe. As far as NIO goes, however, I'm a little bit concerned because of the fact that we have some weakness on this chart. I think there is upside potential for about 4.5, and we'll see if we break it. But just be careful because we're technically on a much larger downtrend. So if we do push a little bit higher for 4.5, there's no guarantee we just continue to go and go and go and go. I want to see NIO hold above 4.5 to start filling some of these gaps in the daily. But we'll see just to be safe if we could hold above these key levels. With that being said, look for 4.5 tomorrow on NIO, and we'll see if we continue to break through it to 4.7. Look for a bounce, and we'll see what kind of reaction we get. Thank you for listening, guys. Have a good day, and peace out.